In the vast expanse of the Milky Way, Earth stood as a beacon of hope and progress. Humans, once confined to their blue planet, now reached for the stars with an enthusiasm that both impressed and worried their galactic neighbors. It had been only 50 years since Earth made first contact, yet already human colonies dotted dozens of worlds across several star systems. Among these colonies was New Eden, a lush green planet orbiting a distant sun. It was here that young Emily Taylor, just 7 years old, lived with her parents. Emily loved to explore the alien forests near her home, marveling at the strange plants and creatures that called New Eden home. On a sunny morning, as Emily played in her backyard, the sky suddenly darkened. Massive ships, their hulls covered in strange symbols, appeared above the colony. Before anyone could react, beams of energy rained down from the vessels. Buildings crumbled, and screams filled the air. Emily's mother ran outside, desperately calling for her daughter. But it was too late. A stray energy blast struck near Emily, and in an instant, her small body lay still on the scorched grass. As quickly as they had appeared, the alien ships vanished, leaving behind a devastated colony and a grieving population. Emily's death was just one of many that day, but her story would soon ignite a fire across human space. News of the attack spread rapidly. On Earth, billions watched in horror as images of the destruction on New Eden filled their screens. Emily's face, smiling in a school photo taken just weeks before, became a symbol of all that had been lost. In the halls of power, Earth's leaders gathered for an emergency meeting. The United Earth Government's headquarters in Geneva buzzed with activity as presidents, prime ministers, and military commanders from around the world arrived. Admiral Jane Chen, the head of Earth's Space Force, stood before the assembled leaders. Her face was grim as she presented the facts of the attack. "The aliens who did this," she said, her voice steady, but filled with barely contained rage, "are known as the Zarkul. They're a warrior race from a distant arm of the galaxy. Until now, they've ignored us, considering humanity too weak to bother with." President Maria Alvarez of the United Earth Government leaned forward. "And now?" she asked. Admiral Chen's eyes flashed. "Now they've made a grave mistake. They've shown us that they consider human lives worthless. They killed our children without provocation or warning. We cannot let this stand." A debate erupted among the leaders. Some argued for caution, fearing that a strong response might lead to full-scale war. Others demanded immediate and overwhelming retaliation. As the arguments raged, a quiet voice spoke up. It was Emily's father, Dr. James Taylor, invited to the meeting as a representative of the New Eden survivors. "My daughter," he said, his voice breaking, "loved to look up at the stars. She dreamed of the day she'd fly among them. The Zarkul didn't just kill Emily. They killed her dreams, her future. They killed a part of humanity's future." He looked around the room, tears in his eyes. "We must show them that humanity's children are not to be trifled with." His words settled over the assembly like a shroud. One by one, the leaders nodded in agreement. President Alvarez stood, her decision made. "Admiral Chen," she said, "you have authorization to deploy the fleet. Show the Zarkul, and any others who might threaten us, the full might of Earth." Within hours, shipyards around Earth and its colonies burst into frenzied activity. Massive warships, their hulls gleaming with the latest technology humanity had to offer, prepared for departure. Soldiers and crew members boarded by the thousands, each carrying with them the weight of humanity's grief and determination. As the fleet assembled in Earth's orbit, news spread across the galaxy. Other alien races watched with a mixture of concern and curiosity. Many had underestimated the humans, seeing them as upstarts in a galaxy of ancient civilizations. Now, as Earth's armada prepared to set out, those same races began to reassess their views. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the flagship, the UES Avenger. Around her, crew members worked at their stations, their faces set with grim determination. On the main screen, the image of Emily Taylor smiled out at them. a reminder of why they fought. "All ships report ready, Admiral," her second-in-command announced. Chen nodded, her eyes fixed on the stars ahead. "Then let's go remind the galaxy that humanity's children are under our protection." She paused, then added quietly, "For Emily." As one, Earth's fleet engaged their drives. In a flash of light, they vanished into the depths of space, carrying with them humanity's message to the stars. "We are not to be trifled with. We are the unstoppable force." The vast emptiness of space stretched before Admiral Chen's fleet. For weeks, they had traveled at speeds that would have amazed their ancestors. Yet the distance to Zarkol space remained immense. On the bridge of the UES Avenger, Chen studied the star charts. Her second-in-command, Captain Li, approached with a datapad. "Admiral, we've received new intel," he said, his voice low. "The Zarkol have learned of our approach. They're mobilizing their forces." Chen nodded, her face grim. "As expected, they won't take our challenge lightly." She turned to the communications officer. "Send word to all ships. Battle stations in 1 hour." As the order spread through the fleet, tension mounted. In the mess hall of the Avenger, soldiers shared nervous glances. Private Sarah Jones, barely out of training, clutched her food tray tightly. "I never thought I'd see real combat so soon," she murmured to her bunkmate. Across the table, Sergeant Mike Rodriguez offered a reassuring smile. "Stay focused on why we're here," he said, tapping a picture pinned to the wall. It showed Emily Taylor's face, a reminder of their mission. "We're not just fighting for revenge. We're fighting to protect all the Emilys back home." In the engine room, Chief Engineer Priya Patel ran final checks on the Avenger's massive fusion drives. Her team worked tirelessly, knowing that their skills could mean the difference between victory and defeat. As Priya adjusted a power coupling, she thought of her own daughter back on Earth. The thought steeled her resolve. Hours passed, and the fleet entered Zarkol territory. Almost immediately, alarms blared across every ship. "Multiple contacts detected," shouted the sensor operator on the Avenger's bridge. "Zarkol warships approaching fast." Admiral Chen's eyes narrowed. "So, they've come to meet us. Good. All ships, battle formation Delta. Prepare to engage." The human fleet spread out in a complex pattern, a dance of ships that had been practiced countless times in simulations. As they maneuvered, the first volley of Zarkol energy weapons flashed past them. "Return fire," Chen ordered. The space between the fleets lit up with the exchange of weapons fire. Beams of energy and streams of missiles crisscrossed the void. On the smaller destroyer UES Defiant, Captain Maria Gonzalez gritted her teeth as her ship shook from a near miss. "Evasive maneuvers," she shouted. "Bring us around for another pass." The battle raged for hours. Human technology, while newer, proved a match for the Zarkol's experience. Ships on both sides fell to the onslaught, crews fighting valiantly to the last. In the midst of the chaos, a group of Zarkol cruisers broke through the human lines, heading straight for the Avenger. Admiral Chen saw the danger immediately. "All power to forward shields," she commanded. The Zarkol ships unleashed a barrage of fire. The Avenger shuddered under the assault, but held. As the enemy ships passed, they exposed their vulnerable rear sections. "Now," Chen ordered, "all batteries, fire." The Avenger's guns roared to life, tearing into the Zarkol cruisers. 2 exploded in brilliant flashes, while the third spun out of control, its engines dark. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out. Human determination matched Zarkol ferocity, resulting in a grueling stalemate. But slowly, hour by hour, the tide began to turn. Private Jones, operating a point defense turret, cheered as she shot down an incoming missile. Sergeant Rodriguez, leading a damage control team, worked tirelessly to keep their section of the ship intact. In engineering, Priya Patel's quick thinking prevented a catastrophic engine failure, keeping the Avenger in the fight. As the battle entered its 10th hour, the Zarkol lines began to waver. Admiral Chen, her uniform stained with sweat and soot from a minor fire on the bridge, sensed the moment had come. "All ships," she broadcast, "this is it. Push forward with everything you've got. Show them the strength of humanity." With a unified effort, the Earth fleet surged forward. Ships that had been on the defensive now pressed the attack. The Zarkol, unprepared for such sustained resistance, began to retreat. As the enemy fled, a cheer went up across the human ships. They had done it. They had faced one of the galaxy's most feared warrior races and emerged victorious. Admiral Chen allowed herself a small smile, but she knew this was just the beginning. They had won the battle, but the war was far from over. As she watched the stars beyond the viewscreen, Chen thought of Emily Taylor and all the children of Earth. "We'll keep you safe," she whispered, "no matter the cost." The aftermath of the battle left an eerie calm in its wake. Debris from both human and Zarkol ships floated silently in the vast emptiness of space. On board the UES Avenger, Admiral Chen stood before a holographic display of the sector, her face etched with both triumph and concern. "Status report," she commanded, her voice hoarse from hours of shouting orders. Captain Lee stepped forward, datapad in hand. "We've won the day, Admiral, but at a cost. We've lost nearly a third of our fleet. The Zarkol losses are heavier, but they're retreating to their core worlds. Our long-range scans show they're regrouping." Chen nodded grimly. "They underestimated us this time. They won't make that mistake again." She turned to her communications officer. "Send word to Earth. We need reinforcements, and we need them now." As the message was relayed across light years, the fleet began the arduous task of repairs. On the lower decks of the Avenger, Sergeant Rodriguez led his team in patching hull breaches. The work was dangerous, with only a thin force field separating them from the vacuum of space. "Steady now," Rodriguez called out as Private Jones carefully welded a metal plate into place. "Remember, slow is smooth, and smooth is fast." Jones nodded, her hands shaking slightly as she finished the weld. As she stepped back to inspect her work, Rodriguez placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You did good, kid. We all did." Meanwhile, in the ship's medical bay, Dr. Amelia Foster worked tirelessly to treat the wounded. Beds were filled with injured crew members, their groans of pain mixing with the beeping of medical equipment. As she moved from patient to patient, Dr. Foster caught sight of a young ensign staring blankly at the ceiling. She recognized the signs of shock and PTSD immediately. Kneeling beside his bed, she spoke softly. "It's okay to feel overwhelmed. This was your first battle, wasn't it?" The ensign nodded, tears welling in his eyes. I didn't think it would be like this. So much death." Dr. Foster took his hand. "We're fighting for something important. Remember, Emily. Remember why we're here. It's okay to feel pain, but don't let it consume you. We need every one of you to stay strong." Days passed as the fleet licked its wounds and prepared for the next engagement. In engineering, Chief Engineer Priya Patil worked around the clock to bring the Avengers systems back to full capacity. "Reroute power from the auxiliary couplings," she ordered her team. "We need those shields at maximum strength before the Zarkol return." As her engineers scrambled to comply, Priya allowed herself a moment of reflection. She thought of her daughter back on Earth, of Emily Taylor, of all the children counting on them. With renewed determination, she dove back into her work. On the bridge, Admiral Chen pored over intelligence reports. The Zarkol were a warrior race, yes, but they weren't stupid. They would adapt their tactics, find new ways to counter the human fleet's strengths. "We need to stay one step ahead," she muttered to herself. Then, louder, to her tactical officer, "Run simulations on these new Zarkol formations. I want counter-strategies developed for every possible scenario." As the fleet prepared for the next battle, news of their victory spread across human space. On Earth and its colonies, people celebrated in the streets. Humanity had stood up to one of the galaxy's great powers and emerged victorious. But amid the celebrations, there was an undercurrent of tension. Everyone knew this was just the beginning. The Zarkol would not take this defeat lightly. In the halls of the United Earth government, President Alvarez met with her advisors. "We need to press our advantage," she declared. "But we also need to be prepared for a long war. Increase production at all shipyards. Implement wartime economic measures." And she paused, her expression solemn. "Begin drafting plans for full mobilization. We may need every able-bodied human before this is over." Back in Zarkol space, Admiral Chen received the message from Earth. Reinforcements were on their way, but it would take time. They would have to hold the line until help arrived. As she looked out at the stars, Chen's resolve hardened. The Zarkol had awakened a sleeping giant. They had killed a human child, thinking there would be no consequences. Now they would learn just how grave their error had been. "For Emily," Chen whispered, echoing the sentiment that had become a battle cry across the fleet. "For all our children, we will not fail." The stars streaked by as the reinforcement fleet from Earth raced towards Admiral Chen's position. On the bridge of the newly commissioned UES Retribution, Captain Javier Ortiz watched the blur of light with a mixture of anticipation and dread. "ETA to rendezvous point," he asked his navigation officer. 3 hours, sir," came the reply. Ortiz nodded, his mind racing with the stories they'd heard of the first battle. The human victory had been hard-won, and the Zarkol would not be caught off guard again. As the reinforcement fleet neared its destination, alarms suddenly blared across every ship. "Multiple hyperspace signatures detected," shouted the sensor operator. "It's the Zarkol. They're launching a surprise attack." Captain Ortiz's training kicked in immediately. Battle stations, all ships, defensive formation Delta 3. The space around them erupted into chaos as Zarkol warships poured out of hyperspace. Energy beams and missiles crisscrossed the void, finding targets among both fleets. On board the UES Avenger, Admiral Chen received the distress call from the reinforcements. "Damn it," she muttered. "They were waiting for this." She turned to her crew. "All ships, prepare for immediate jump. We're going to rescue our people." As Chen's battle-worn fleet raced to aid their comrades, the reinforcements fought desperately against the Zarkol onslaught. On the Retribution, Captain Ortiz gripped his command chair as the ship shuddered under enemy fire. "Shields at 60% and falling," reported the tactical officer. "Reroute power from non-essential systems," Ortiz ordered. "Keep those shields up." In the engine room, a young engineer named Alex Chen, no relation to the admiral, worked frantically to keep the ship's systems online. As sparks flew from overloading circuits, Alex thought of his boyfriend back on Earth, of the life they planned together. With renewed determination, he plunged his hands into a tangle of wires, ignoring the burns as he made critical repairs. Meanwhile, in the depths of Zarkol space, an unexpected development was unfolding. A group of Zarkol scientists, led by the venerable Dr. Cathor, had been secretly monitoring the conflict. Unlike their warrior brethren, they saw the humans not as enemies, but as a fascinating species worthy of study. "The human's resilience is remarkable," Cathor mused, his scaled fingers tapping on a datapad. "Their emotional response to the child's death has united them in ways we didn't anticipate." His assistant, a younger Zarkol named Zix, looked troubled. "But Master, if we share our findings with the High Command, it could lead to even more brutal tactics against the humans." Thor's eyes narrowed. Perhaps, or perhaps it's time for a different approach. He turned to a secure communication terminal. "Contact the human fleet. It's time we opened a dialogue." Back in the battle, things were looking grim for the human reinforcements. The Retribution's shields had failed, and hull breaches were reported on multiple decks. Captain Ortiz, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead, barked orders to his crew. "Evacuate sections 12 through 15. Divert all remaining power to weapons." Just as all seemed lost, Space rippled as Admiral Chen's fleet arrived. The Avenger led the charge, its guns blazing as it tore into the Zarkol rear lines. "This is Admiral Chen to all ships," her voice crackled over the comms. "Stand firm. Help has arrived." The tide of battle began to turn once more. Human ships, fighting with the desperation of those protecting their homes and families, pushed back against the Zarkol assault. In the midst of the chaos, a strange signal cut through the battlefield chatter. "This is Dr. Cathor of the Zarkol Science Academy," a gravelly voice announced. "To the human fleet, we wish to parley." Admiral Chen, surprised by this unexpected development, hesitated for a moment. Could this be a trick, or was it a genuine opportunity to end the bloodshed? With Emily Taylor's face flashing in her mind, Chen made her decision. "This is Admiral Chen. We're listening, Dr. Cathor." As the battle raged around them, a small window of communication opened between the two sides. For the first time since the conflict began, words were exchanged instead of weapons fire. In that moment, the future of both species hung in the balance. The unstoppable force of humanity's grief and determination had brought them to this point. Now, they faced a choice: continue down the path of war, or take a chance on understanding their enemy. The next moves would determine the fate of not just the fleet, but of Earth and the Zarkol homeworld as well. The war for Emily had opened a door, and what lay beyond it was anybody's guess. The battlefield fell into an uneasy quiet as Admiral Chen's voice echoed across the comm channels. "Dr. Cathor, this is unexpected. What do you propose?" The gravelly voice of the Zarkol scientist replied. "A ceasefire, Admiral. There is much we need to discuss." Chen's eyes narrowed. "A ceasefire? After you attacked our colonies, killed our children? Those actions were not sanctioned by all Zarkol," Cathor explained. "There is disagreement among our people. Please, allow us to meet face to face." After a tense moment, Chen made her decision. "Very well. We'll send a shuttle to these coordinates. But be warned, any sign of treachery, and we'll resume the attack." As preparations for the meeting began, the human fleet remained on high alert. On the UES Retribution, Captain Ortiz oversaw emergency repairs. In the engine room, Alex Chen worked tirelessly, his hands bandaged from earlier burns. "How are we looking, Chen?" Ortiz asked over the intercom. Alex wiped sweat from his brow. "We've got basic systems online, Captain, but we're held together with spit and prayers right now." Ortiz chuckled despite the situation. "Good work. Keep it up." Meanwhile, on the Avenger, Admiral Chen prepared for the meeting. She chose a small team to accompany her: Dr. Amelia Foster for her medical expertise, Sergeant Rodriguez for security, and surprisingly, Private Sarah Jones. "Sir?" Jones asked, confused by her selection. "Why me?" Chen's eyes softened. "Because you represent the future we're fighting for, Private. The Zarkol need to see that." As the human shuttle departed, tension filled the air. On the Zarkol side, Dr. Cathor faced opposition from military leaders. "This is madness, Cathor," growled General Vexkar. "We should crush the humans while they're weak." Thor stood his ground. "And then what? Fight an endless war. There's more to gain through understanding." The meeting took place on a neutral space station. As the airlock cycled open, humans and Zarkol faced each other for the first time without weapon fire between them. The Zarkol were tall, reptilian creatures with iridescent scales and piercing eyes. Dr. Cathor stepped forward, his aged face showing lines of worry. "Admiral Chen," he said, bowing slightly, "thank you for agreeing to this meeting." Chen nodded curtly. "Let's get to the point, Doctor. Why are we here?" Thor gestured to a conference room. As they settled in, he began to explain. "The attack on your colony was carried out by a faction of our military, led by General Vexkar. They believe that emerging species like yours should be culled before becoming a threat." Private Jones couldn't contain herself. "A threat? We were peaceful until you killed Emily. Thor's eyes widened. Emily, the child. He turned to his assistant, Zix. You didn't tell me a child was involved. Zix looked uncomfortable. We didn't know the significance. Of course you didn't, Dr. Foster interjected. You don't understand human culture. Our children are sacred to us. Thor nodded slowly. I see. This explains the ferocity of your response. Among the Zarkul, the loss of offspring is regrettable, but not uncommon. We lay many eggs, knowing few will survive. Chen leaned forward. Well, we're not Zarkul. Every human life is precious, especially our children. Your people killed Emily Taylor, and we won't rest until justice is served. The meeting continued for hours. Thor explained that many Zarkul, especially in the scientific community, opposed the military's actions. They saw humans as a species to learn from, not destroy. As the discussions wound down, Thor made a surprising offer. We cannot undo the harm done, but we can offer reparations. And more importantly, we can offer an alliance. Chen raised an eyebrow. An alliance. Thor nodded. Yes, against the military hardliners. Help us overthrow Vexkar and his followers, and we can forge a peace between our peoples. The human team exchanged glances. It was an unexpected turn, but one that could end the war. We'll need to discuss this with our leadership, Chen said finally. But it's a start. As they prepared to leave, Private Jones approached Thor. Doctor, she said hesitantly, do you have children? Thor's eyes softened. I have clutchmates. Many did not survive to adulthood. Is that why you fight so hard? For your young. Jones nodded. For Emily. For all the children who'll never see the stars. As the humans boarded their shuttle, a new understanding began to form. The war wasn't over, but a path to peace had opened. The unstoppable force of humanity had brought them to this point, and now it might forge an unlikely alliance that could change the galaxy forever. The return journey to Earth was tense. Admiral Chen's shuttle docked with the UES Avenger, and she immediately called a meeting of her senior staff. The conference room buzzed with nervous energy as Chen recounted her meeting with Dr. Thor. An alliance with the Zarkul. Captain Lee's voice was incredulous. After everything they've done. Chen held up a hand. Not with all Zarkul, with Thor's faction. They want to overthrow their military hardliners. Dr. Foster leaned forward. It could end the war without further bloodshed. Or it could be a trap, Sergeant Rodriguez countered. As the debate raged, Private Jones sat quietly, her mind racing. Finally, she spoke up. What about Emily? The room fell silent. Chen turned to her. What do you mean, Private? Jones swallowed hard. We started this war for her, for justice. Does allying with any Zarkul dishonor her memory? The question hung heavy in the air. Chen closed her eyes, thinking of the young girl whose death had sparked this conflict. When she opened them, her gaze was resolute. Emily wouldn't want more children to die, she said softly. If this alliance can prevent that, we owe it to her to try. The journey back to Earth took weeks. During that time, the fleet remained on high alert. On the Retribution, Captain Ortiz oversaw combat drills, keeping his crew sharp. In the engine room, Alex Chen worked on improvements to the ship's systems. As he tinkered with a power coupling, he thought of his boyfriend back home. Would this war ever end? Would he see him again? Meanwhile, on the Zarkul homeworld, Dr. Thor faced challenges of his own. He stood before the Science Council, arguing his case. The humans are not the threat Vexkar claims, he insisted. They're a young species, yes, but one with immense potential. We can learn from them, grow alongside them. An elder council member leaned forward. And what of their aggression? Their fleet devastated our forces. Thor's assistant, Zix, stepped forward. That was in response to our attack. An attack on their young. We made a grave error in underestimating their response. As discussions continued on both sides, Earth's leadership grappled with the decision. President Alvarez sat in the Oval Office, listening to Admiral Chen's report via hologram. "It's a risk," Chen concluded, "but one I believe we must take." Alvarez nodded slowly. "And the public? How will they react to allying with those who killed Emily?" "It won't be easy," Chen admitted, "but if we frame it right, as a path to justice and lasting peace, they might accept it." The president stood, walking to the window. Outside, she could see the Washington Monument, a testament to human perseverance. "Very well, Admiral. You have my authorization to proceed, but cautiously." With Earth's approval, preparations began for a summit between human leaders and Cathor's faction. The meeting would take place on a neutral space station, under heavy guard from both sides. As the day approached, tensions ran high. On Earth and its colonies, debates raged. Many supported the peace initiative, but others called for continued war, unwilling to forgive the Zarkol for Emily's death. In orbit around Earth, the combined human fleet assembled. It was an awesome sight. Hundreds of ships, from massive dreadnoughts to agile fighters. A show of strength, even as they reached for peace. Aboard the Avenger, Admiral Chen made final preparations. She had chosen a delegation that included military, scientific, and civilian representatives. Among them was Dr. James Taylor, Emily's father. "Are you sure about this, Dr. Taylor?" Chen asked gently. James nodded, his eyes filled with a mix of grief and determination. Emily loved the stars. She dreamed of meeting alien life. If her death can lead to peace, to understanding between our species, then maybe it wasn't in vain. As the delegation boarded their ship, news spread across human space. This summit could change the course of the war, of human history itself. On the Retribution, now fully repaired, Captain Ortiz addressed his crew. "Whatever happens at this summit, we remain vigilant. We hope for peace, but we're ready for anything." In the engine room, Alex Chen clutched a holophoto of his boyfriend. "Just a little longer," he whispered. "We're almost there." As the diplomatic vessel departed Earth, carrying hopes for peace and the weight of Emily's memory, the entire human race held its breath. The unstoppable force that had begun with one child's death now stood on the brink of reshaping the galaxy. The summit awaited, and with it, the future of two species. The neutral space station loomed large as the human diplomatic vessel approached. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge, watching the massive structure grow closer. Beside her, Dr. James Taylor fidgeted nervously. "It's larger than I imagined," James murmured. Chen nodded. "Built by an ancient race, long gone now. Fitting place for a new beginning." As they docked, tension filled the air. The human delegation, led by Chen, and including James, disembarked. They were met by Dr. Cathor and his group of Zarkol scientists and moderate politicians. "Welcome, Admiral," Thor said, bowing slightly. "And Dr. Taylor, we are deeply sorry for your loss." James swallowed hard but managed a nod. The groups moved to a large conference room, its windows offering a spectacular view of the stars. As discussions began, light years away, other events were unfolding. On the Zarkol homeworld, General Vexkar paced in his war room. "This peace talks are a mistake," he growled. "The humans must be crushed." His aide approached cautiously. "Sir, we've lost popular support. The people are tired of war." Vexkar's eyes narrowed. "Then we'll give them a reason to fight. Prepare my ship. We're going to crash this peace conference." Back on the station, progress was being made. Thor explained Zarkol biology and culture, helping the humans understand the misunderstanding that led to the war. "Our young are numerous, with many not surviving to adulthood," he explained. "We didn't realize the profound impact the loss of a single child would have on your species." James spoke up, his voice quiet but firm. Every child is precious to us. Emily was our future, our hope. Thor nodded solemnly. We understand that now, and we want to make amends. As they discussed reparations and future cooperation, alarms suddenly blared throughout the station. A Zarkol battle cruiser had just dropped out of hyperspace nearby. It's Vexkar, Thor exclaimed. He's come to stop us. Chen sprang into action. Everyone to the ships. We need to evacuate. As they raced through the corridors, the station shook from weapons fire. Chen's communicator crackled to life. It was Captain Ortiz on the Retribution. Admiral, we engaged Vexkar's ship, but we're outgunned. Chen gritted her teeth. Hold them off, Captain. We're coming. They reached the docking bay to find it in chaos. A stray blast had damaged the human diplomatic vessel. It was dead in the water. Cathor turned to Chen. Take my ship. It's our only chance. For a moment, Chen hesitated. Could she trust him? But seeing the sincerity in his eyes, she nodded. Everyone aboard. Move. As they boarded the Zarkol ship, James found himself working alongside Zix, Thor's assistant, to get the engines online. Despite their differences, they worked in perfect sync. The ship lifted off just as another explosion rocked the station. As they cleared the docking bay, they saw the Retribution locked in fierce combat with Vexkar's cruiser. We need to help them, Chen said. Cathor nodded, taking the helm. I know this ship's weaknesses. We can do this. Together. What followed was an epic space battle. The Retribution, battered but unbroken, fought valiantly. Chen's borrowed Zarkol ship darted in, striking at critical points that Cathor identified. In engineering, James and Zix worked frantically to keep systems online. As they worked, James spotted a holophoto of what looked like Zarkol children. Your family? He asked. Zix nodded. My clutchmates. Only 2 of us survived. In that moment, an understanding passed between them. Different as they were, both species knew the pain of loss. On the bridge, Chen and Cathor coordinated their attack. There, Cathor pointed. Hit that spot, and we can disable their weapons. Chen relayed the order to Ortiz. The Retribution fired, striking true. Vexkar's ship went dark, drifting helplessly. As the dust settled, Chen turned to Cathor. It's over. We've won. Thor shook his head. No, Admiral. We've only just begun. In the days that followed, news of the battle spread. Vexkar was arrested, his warmongering exposed. The peace talks resumed, this time with even greater purpose. 1 month later, on Earth, a historic treaty was signed. Humans and Zarkol agreed to share knowledge, resources, and to explore the stars together. At the ceremony, James Taylor stood with Cathor, watching their leaders shake hands. Emily would have loved this, James said softly. Cathor placed a gentle claw on James' shoulder. Then let us honor her memory by building a future she would be proud of. As the sun set on this new era of peace, the stars seemed to shine a little brighter. The unstoppable force of humanity's love for their children had not only ended a war, but forged an alliance that would shape the galaxy for generations to come. In the end, Emily Taylor's dream of meeting alien life had come true, in a way no one could have imagined.